It's like, oh my goodness, 10 new currencies came on board.
Guess what? By the time there's a policy to govern those 10, there's 20 more.
Right.
So
I mean, look at Facebook alone. Their user base is larger than the U.S. population. You know, so they have the potential to be, you know, as large as any, you know, major currency in the world.
And I'd suggest that Facebook, because it's about people themselves, that motivation, that self-image thing, I think is the most basic motivator in human nature. Right. And so if you're going to spend money, just like you used to spend money on the car in the driveway or your shoes, if you're going to spend money to impress the people in your new world, Facebook would be the Exhibit A place where you'd probably do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're at very early stages, right? I mean, people, you know, it's a long way before the actual payment volume reaches, you know, anything significant relative to physical goods and that sort of thing. But in terms of global e-commerce, that platform is not to be taken lightly.
Right.
And I guarantee you that there are lots of people at the OCC and other foreign governments that are thinking about the implications of this. You know, and people, I mean, you see it today, even in not just Facebook, but any type of global virtual economy. And back to like inflation and like you talked about Bretton Woods earlier, and you see most of these currencies are pretty simplistic. They're basically pegged to usually the US dollar. And if you want to buy a virtual good, say a virtual flaming sword of death for a game, let's say, it's going to cost you $5 US, and that may be affordable for Americans, but that's not affordable for someone in, you know, Chile.
Right.
And so the you know, back to like what's the definition of a currency? You had a very good one. The goal of the currency, in my opinion, is to, you know, to lubricate the gears of commerce. And so they've got to learn how to solve those types of situations where, you know, you can equalize purchasing power in local economies where, you know, their local currency is not as strong.
Yeah.
And so they're buying into a stronger currency.
The big Mac.
They've got to come up with something that's equivalent with that,
Because of what I was saying about the manipulation of currencies is common now, I wonder if there isn't an increased need, and kind of the G20 is floundering around this, but no matter how you feel about manipulation, it's not a market. And so I wonder if, whether it's, you know, a company like yours on a larger scale or a company like, you know, somebody on this stage or somebody else, but a new basket, a new electronic basket, not just of 4 currencies, but of 20 currencies, which therefore has lower beta, right, lower volatility, and which isn't easy to sway, isn't easily corrupted, would be a great thing for the world. I don't know if is anybody heading that direction, do you know?
Well, there's a reason why PayPal and Visa and MasterCard don't settle in every currency around the globe. And we settle in those currencies that are stable, and that helps keep stability in the core payment system. And what you're describing, and I may just be thick here, but you know, when you go back, our company started 52 years ago. So an employee of Bank of America had this vision, and it was a cash and check world. And they wanted to create this currency. Bank of America, Visa, MasterCard, everybody came from that. But ultimately, you know, the Federal Reserve, which used to see all of the commerce come through its shop in the context of clearing checks or moving cash.
They're almost irrelevant now.
Now they're seeing a subset, a small subset of the U.S. economy. And so the question is, does that happen in a way that is in the best interest of the consumer and the broader economy? At least at the moment, it appears that things have been operated well. And I agree with you. Over time, you just, what is the next leap? What is the next jump?
Right. But back in those days, too, I mean, you didn't have interstate banking laws preventing commerce across state borders, right?
Exactly right.
And so I mean, I guess 50 years ago, when your teams were coming up with, you know, this business, there probably was at least a presupposition of at least a countrywide payment network, whereas now everyone starts with the global assumption, right? And that's a big difference. Today.
I want to mention Amazon just because they're not here at the stage, but they've introduced this new signature services thing where you make up your own name and you get authenticated once on the site, and you can go to any agreeing site and use that as a payment service, and you can see where that's headed.
Right.
So back to the mobile lifestyle again, not the mobile phone. Clearly, you can travel anywhere where there's a signed-on partner and buy a shirt and just put in Ulysses, whatever your name is, and you get the shirt. Right. So that's a currency, just the fact of a name, of a code name. I'm not sure how well that's going to work internationally, but it's an interesting idea. I'd like to open this to people to ask questions, and I'm sure we have runners, we have hands. Do we have microphones? Yes, we do. Here they come.
So Stephen Sprague from Wave Systems. I'd love to hear you expand a little bit on the conversation around security. And the reason for it is that today, the inadequacy of security within the banking and payment systems is funding the fundamental community of hackers that are out there, and it's growing. And the inconvenience that it's creating in all other aspects of our lives, whether it's spam or phishing or whatever, they're perfecting their techniques because it's so easy to steal money from the banking system from a fraud perspective that they can be successful at it, make money at it, et cetera. And systemically, it's getting dramatically worse on a daily basis as opposed to dramatically better.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet, you know, we have smart card technologies, we have tokens, we have all these kinds of things. I'm still carrying around only MagStripe cards in my wallet. Chip and PIN was just hacked because the people who implemented chip and PIN in the UK didn't do it right. It feels like we're talking about commerce in the cable industry in the 1980s, and we all just discovered that the set-top box we deployed to 100 million people got hacked. And so we're going to have to go forklift upgrade all those people with a new set-top box. So help me to understand what you're really going to do, because so far we've done not enough.
I agree with you, and we'll get to that in just one second. I want to recommend a book to everybody, if you haven't read it, called Fatal System Error by Joseph Menn, which documents exactly what you're talking about in a lot of detail, and it gives you the exact perspective that I think you've got. I know you're inside of this stuff too, but it's very frightening. And so if you thought that this problem is being solved, it's not. And in fact, these botnets are getting bigger and more powerful, and they're becoming more automated. And it's a true business. It's a Walmart story. You can simply go to a website if you got the code word and buy IDs all day long and use them for whatever you want.
So my only additional point to it is that there are tools that have been built and that are out there, and there's an enormous failure by the industry to adopt them.
And Stephen, by the way, makes some of those tools. So Bill?
So, I mean, my initial thoughts. First of all, I don't buy into the notion that it's an enormous problem. It's probably the biggest problem facing the industry because it cuts to the matter of trust. If the consumer and the merchants can't come together, if in these environments people don't feel comfortable transacting, then everything starts to break down.
Well, and it's funding some other bad behaviors.
It is.
It's funding some other bad behaviors that we don't want to see.
Having said that, fraud rates have been cut in half in a payment system that is growing dramatically over the last decade. So when you've moved from non-electronic forms of, stupid forms of payment to electronic forms of payment, there has been risk taken out of the system.
But Bill, do you mean ID theft or frauds on?
I'm just talking about loss associated with account compromise, ID
All right,
theft.
so here's one of the big things, another nightmare that I put together, and it's now going to be a movie, and it's already happened in real life to RBS. And I call it the elegant catastrophe, and the idea was all these IDs are being stolen in the millions and millions and millions, but they're only coming back as crimes in the thousands. What's happening here? Is somebody holding on to these for a rainy day? And in fact, they did that to RBS, right? Now we've seen it happen 2 or 3 times where the guys that Steve's talking about save them up, pop them all at once. They use mules or whatever else they want to use. They go around to every ATM in the world at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, and they pull out $500. So that worked, and I think that's the kind of stuff we're talking about that's beyond the usual gas station.
It is beyond, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a $1 billion problem when you think about the global economy. When you think about it in terms of $3 trillion in commerce that comes through our network, it looks small, but it's a huge problem. Having said that, it's not banks that are getting compromised. RBS I'm familiar with. It's typically technology companies, software service providers. When we've got a value chain from the merchants through the network all the way to the banks, and it's all about trying to get, literally hundreds of millions of people to come together and transact every day. And I'm not saying that you can't better fortify, but we've got technology in an e-commerce environment, 3D secure and authentication methods that would virtually eliminate this risk. The reason why they don't work is because they stand in the way of merchants transacting with consumers. Consumers abandon the shopping experience. They're kludgy. So it's an impossible balance to try to figure out how do you let the skids get greased.
So Steve has some stuff that he wants to talk to you about later, which he thinks
But
can do that.
I would add, because I agree with you that not enough is happening, but I would add the internet actually presents additional opportunities for security, because there's some things that I know many companies, including us, have invested in around IP intelligence, right? So things that wouldn't be normal in banking systems, but because the internet infrastructure, you can do a lot of analytics and modeling, and there's work we even do with government agencies to go after the bad guys. They're going to keep coming, but the internet actually presents opportunities for technologies that can further understand fraud.
Yeah. As does the mobile device for near real-time interaction with the consumer when something funky is happening with your account.
Now we had another, and you have a, great, go ahead.
Thank you. Jim Breyer with Axel Partners.
Hi, Jim.
Would love to get your perspective on how the nature of the merchant is changing, if you will, and the rules of the game are changing. Easily 10 years ago, you could say Amazon or Walmart, eBay were the major internet merchants. Perhaps not Walmart, but certainly eBay and Amazon. Today, most of the young companies that we're backing in the venture capital industry in terms of merchants and commerce sit right at the intersection of mobile, social, and consumer e-commerce. And so it's people recommending products and services to other people, et cetera. What we've found is the moment a Facebook or a Groupon or an Etsy starts to reach critical mass, or Walmart for that matter on the internet, they try to reinvent a payment system. There's a start from scratch. Let's figure out whether we should talk to Citi or PayPal, Amazon. Amazon will give a better deal if they're trying to buy business. There are the international implications, et cetera. The question would be, is there enough distinction today for these younger, next generation merchants from where you sit for you all to say, here is a roadmap of how they should be thinking in serving their customers to provide a trusted, long-term payment and microtransaction strategy? Or are we just too early in the game?
Well, you know, I think it is early in the game. You know, I think there are you know, we see there are different modalities at play, but I think that you know, you hit on this notion of this intersection of merchant, brand, I would add to that, retailer, and I think that there's you know, we see startups taking multiple bets. I think that the place that my view on this is that we as a bank, I'm going to answer this from a bank's perspective, that we need to be doing smart experience and placing bets among many different modalities. Because we don't think it's sorted out. The customer will decide, the business models will evolve. So our view on this is let's place bets in a number of different modalities and a number of different forms so that we can learn and collectively partner with these emerging commerce entities to provide real value. Yeah, so ultimately that's it.
I don't know that we can say we got it all right, but the easier thing for PayPal is it's actually where PayPal started, right? While somebody at PayPal was thinking up a strategy, eBay sellers promoted PayPal. So it's kind of core to what we do, and the developer platform has actually a lot of startup entrepreneurs. So we don't have it all right, but a main part of what we spend a lot of our time doing is partnering with small people and try to present a payment strategy that helps them grow and serve their customers. So a lot of that's still changing, but that is at the end of the day what we do most of our time.
I mean, the last couple of years have shown us a lot too. I mean, Jim, a lot of the companies you guys are backing are making their business models on selling digital and non-physical goods. And when you remove that constraint, you open the opportunity to a whole different world of payment systems, and that's why companies like ZONG exist. That's why companies exist that let you trade your time to fill out a survey to give a market researcher more information in exchange for some value, or sign up for a Netflix subscription that you might otherwise wanted to do anyway in order to get a discount off something else. There's all kinds of new, creative, innovative young payment systems cropping up as a result of this digital economy that is seeking new business models away from advertising.